As mentioned, my name's Mikael Myllymäki. I'm heading the external venturing team here at Fortum. So what that means in a bit more simple terms is that I'm in charge of the team taking care of working together with external startups through pilots, acquisitions and divestment of shares. And then also I take care of our venture capital fund portfolio in Europe and in the US. And what I wanted to talk to you guys about today is basically piloting and in a bit more detail why, as a corporation, we want to pilot and how we actually do it, and also bring a few examples then down the line as I go through the slides. Of course, it's a big topic to discuss in 10 minutes, but let's cut to the chase. Before I go into the piloting itself, just Fortum very, very briefly, what do we do and who are we? So we're a clean energy company focused in the production of CO2-free energy. We're actually the third biggest CO2-free energy producer in Europe at the moment, as you are currently consolidating Uniper, which we own 75% shares in. And we also are fairly big in the recycling and waste space, so basically the circular economy or resource efficiency, as you could call it. And if you look at the energy market overall, I mean, we've been producing electricity for almost 100 years now, and for a very long time that was a very simple kind of linear solution problem. Essentially, you have a power plant, and that's catering to a demand which changes from time to time. But now in the last 20 years or so, maybe even 10, that's when the acceleration has been happening. We've seen quite a big change fundamentally in how the world works. So basically, wind and solar have been becoming a lot cheaper in terms of the capex, and also batteries becoming a big part of the mix faster and faster every day. So that's leading to big shifts, as the colleagues basically from 50 Hertz were outlining in their presentation. And at the same time, then with the high amount of dry powder and the low capital cost, we're seeing a bit of a shift in the organization and ownership of the assets, contributing, of course, more and more to the fragmentation of production. And then thirdly, digital tools really, of course, enabling a lot of the big solutions to climate change and the other big problems we're facing as mankind, but also then really creating a bit of a shift in terms of who owns what. I mean, it's kind of skills that were previously very focused and specific to the energy sector are becoming more and more generic or software focused, and that's really changing the world quite a bit. So what that means for us as an energy company is really it's do or die right now. We need to be able to innovate in order to stay competitive in the world in the future, and that's really motivating now us as a very big energy company to really invest heavily on the innovation and venturing side, and make sure we're also competitive in the 20 and 30 years to come, as not to get outdated with the world. So what we have on this slide then is an overview of how exactly we approach the innovation and venturing space. And the one key takeaway to take with you from this slide is really you need to approach what we call the innovation and venturing funnel as really a portfolio of activities. You can't solve all of this with one project or one activity, but you really need to be thoughtful and conscious about the different phases, starting from ideation, moving through incubation into acceleration, and then of course the scale and commercialization of the businesses down the line. But there's also an internal and external element coming into that, and the logos and words on this slide are really highlighting quite a number of different activities we have ongoing at Fortum today. Maybe two to talk a bit more deeply about here and then just kind of highlight as examples. One is Valkia, which you see in the middle with actually the portfolio of logos there. That's our investment vehicle for direct investment as Fortum. So Valkia is our growth club at Fortum, and we're currently the shareholder in actually 6 companies, 5 of which are fully owned, and then one called Recharge, where we're the 37% owner. And that's really our way of investing equity directly in the startups and bringing them as part of the Fortum family, but still, let's say, shielding from many of the challenges that come through working with corporation and being part of the corporation equity structure. So that's an important tool going into the future, and we've communicated investing about 50 million euros over the next 3 years in Valkia startups. Another one I want to mention is on the bottom right-hand side there, Valo Ventures, also EIP, the one next to it being our other venture capital fund. Valo, we've committed as an anchor LP 150 million euros into, and that's really our kind of eyes and ears on the ground in the Silicon Valley. But Valo is also investing in Europe in typically Series A, Series B companies, but also a bit of seed, a bit of Series C as well. Really mission driven, but focusing for a brighter future around the same megatrends as Fortum. So this illustrates really the broad array of different activities we have ongoing. Now, I want to zoom in a bit on the piloting side, really. And there's, of course, several layers of how that value comes into the organization. If you look at external startups from the corporation perspective, we're looking at a world where the speed of change is really increasing the whole time. And at the same time, speed and agility are two of the big differences between startups and corporations. So there's a big advantage startups are having over corporates in these areas, and they're becoming more and more relevant in the world today. At the same time, though, of course, corporates have many things that's, startup co-founders would give an arm and a leg for: good customer base, IP, know-how, and all of that related to branding. So it's really my thesis that there is kind of an intersection between these two, where you as corporates and startups can really work together and create something new and important in terms of tackling, again, some of the biggest challenges we have faced as mankind, climate change probably being one of the big ones on the table today. And if you look at the value coming from startups to us as a corporation, you're really addressing the billion-euro question of organizational learning and adapting to new technologies, be those digital or also more physical innovations, particularly prevalent on the recycling and waste side in our license business. So in the pyramid here is kind of an illustration of the different values you're bringing in. The basis really is, how do we learn as an organization through working with startups? Secondly, then, of course, the operative value, in best cases, for example, in production optimization and software solutions there, it can really be a question of a simple EBITDA improvement. You pay a certain amount of money for an AR solution, and it brings you a certain value then in terms of revenues, and that evens out positively. And then, of course, on the very long term and in a more abstract fashion, really allowing you to create new businesses within the kind of areas you're in today, but really the new building blocks and the next steps there. So there really is, I guess, a layering of the different values coming from working together with startups, and that's why, as an organization, we're motivated to finding the best startups to work with as Fortum, and really designing our processes around capturing that value and creating an ecosystem whereby we can create these win-wins and get the most out of working together with startups as a corporation, of course, helping them grow their business. Now, highlighting then a few of the examples and the areas where we have and are today working with startups. These are highlighted in some of the boxes here on the slide, and of course the list goes on forever. Just a few more examples there on the tombstone at the bottom there. But what really ties our thinking together here is that, since learning is such a big part of working with startups and building the value there, addressing this billion-euro question of digitalization and new technologies, it follows that there's really a significant value in creating a culture of working together with the startups and really doing that as broadly as possible throughout the organization. As we surely all know on this call, it's fairly easy and very logical to apply digital solutions to very, very different parts of the world and the problems and solutions we see as a company. So then, coming back to kind of my role in the organization, we're really pushing towards creating this environment where within the different areas as Fortum, we can start developing this mindset and really create these concrete learning examples through piloting, and that way on the long term really contribute into the DNA and our thinking kind of from an inside out perspective as well. A lot of the value comes from other things than just purely the operational gains. So some of the areas to highlight there is really around production optimization. So really the world of commoditizing sensors and more capable analytics, allowing you digitally to basically make the most out of the assets you have on the ground today. Second one, a very interesting one to me, is really career development tools. So how can we personalize and digitize the learning experience for our employees, and the kind of biggest resource we have as a company to making our organization more committed and better at what they do and helping the continuous learning path. Third, and this is very specific to our retail portfolio, about 2.4 million customers in the Nordics, and that's digital consumer offering. So what can we really bring to the customer base that really adds value? We're looking to be more than just electricity retail company, but really look at customers from a consumer solution perspective, not just pure electricity and that's it. Electricity as such is a fairly boring must-have product, but there's a lot of value that can be created, especially now around the empowered consumers trend that we're seeing creating in the world. And finally, then, a big example for us is really recycling and new technologies. what can we apply more on the physical side of things to recycle our plastics more efficiently, or for example, lithium-ion batteries are a big increasing waste problem where we see Fortum as being one of the front runners and really want to address that and find new solutions to help us tackle the problem better and better down the line. And as mentioned, the list goes on for forever pretty much. Now, final slide from my side before I open up for questions, and that's really what have we learned as an organization, and how do we really make this tick? We know that as a corporate, we're among the more slow and difficult customers startups can imagine, but then again, there is a lot of value out there. A few different areas we've looked at there and have been developing over the past 2 years. This really allowed us to get to the next level of our process and the organization. The topic of engaged stakeholders is of course always very important, but what really allows us to bring this in on a very operational level is engaging the business developers and strategists across the company. So in a developed organization, many of the business units have a person dedicated at looking 10, 20 years into the future. And these are exactly the people you're helping with bringing the startup solutions on the table and helping them do their job, as opposed to the more operational people where working together with startups oftentimes is an extra item on the to-do list in a very, very busy schedule already. Second, then, is a fit-for-purpose contracting process. GDPR and data protection agreements, cybersecurity and data access, they're typically the sticking points and something we can't really take shortcuts on. So it's a question for us of creating that process and streamlining it to the best extent possible, and thereby just cutting down on the lead time it takes for us to deploy pilots across the company. Third, then, fairly important, of course, is a clear vision of the relevance and the end game. So not just piloting solutions for the sake of piloting, but rather thinking, if this goes well, then what is the next step? And that's, of course, what allows you to create basically the arithmetic that justifies the pilot at the end of the day. And finally, of course, something worth pointing out always is the next pilot is usually easier. Every time you work together with a company, you learn in the steps, and that allows you to streamline going down the line. So in these areas and for the aforementioned reasons, that's really why as Fortum we've invested already actually several hundred million in the innovation and mentoring space. And of course, working with external companies is a very important part of that. So with those words, let me open it up for questions. I'd love to hear your comments and happy to continue the discussion.
Thanks so much, Mikael. Maybe first one, because it's we're specifically coming from the venturing perspective, right? So if I would be kind of running the kind of a machine learning AI type of focused startup company that specifically focuses on a use case or technologies around that would kind of fit Fortum or kind of energy companies as a whole, how would I engage with you guys? How would you drive, how would this work? How would you kind of also bring me together with the respective units within Fortum that would then leverage my proposed technologies or kind of services?
Yeah, fantastic question, and admittedly one where it's still always a work in progress for us, and as we're fairly new in our increased efforts, one where I feel we still have work to do. But maybe let me divide that into two parts. One is how do you approach Fortum as the first step, and second is how do you find the right person within. Of course, approaching Fortum, there's my email address right there on the slide, so that's maybe the first easy step. And as part of being a developed organization and really approaching the startup side seriously, it's good that we have a full-time team, one which I'm leading, which really has the job of doing that next step of getting the right organization. So also helping a startups guide through the process within the organization and find these use cases that work, because there's typically quite a bit of iteration between a solution to what you're actually tackling, what the business case is. A key point there is what I mentioned with the business developers and the strategists in the company. We engage them in what we call the VPN at our company, so a piloting network, and that's typically the first point of contact for me, and that's where we then draw in also the more specific experts within those teams. But the value with these business developers is, one, they understand the business a lot better than I do because they do it day to day, and then secondly, they work day to day with these people who will be the experts and kind of the people making the decisions at the end of the day.
Understood. And now you're kind of also kind of advertising certain challenges within the company that then I can kind of maybe apply for, or are there such kind of accelerator programs or something like that?
Yeah, good question. Maybe I'll bring up the slide of our funnel, which is maybe a bit faster. But I mean, just one, or actually two examples of that is on the left-hand side here with the yellow logos, the Fortum Bootcamp and the Fortum Forward. The difference being that Bootcamp is an internal ideation challenge, whereas Fortum Forward is the external one. And that's one where we kind of publish the areas we want to work in with startups, and then we have a formal selection process, and then the next step there where we co-create together with our team, and then the winning ideas or the winning startups respectively.
So good. Cool. Thanks so much. And then Rachel joined us again with a question.
Yes. Thanks again, Mikael. I have kind of a follow-up to Yuri's question. So especially when we talk about AI, of course, there are a ton of AI startups, and now maybe they followed the funnel and they found you. How do you then decide what makes a good AI startup to partner with? What kind of specifically are you looking at from AI startups that's would set them apart?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, it's always a bit of a mix of a good solution to the right problem, and then to an extent, to be completely transparent, timing. I mean, the organization is focusing on different things at different times, and some timings are better than others. I guess the key takeaway there for a startup in terms of how can I maximize the probability of succeeding, really focus on bringing a solution to a job to get it done. So basically look at a customer's perspective. You're not looking to work with a product as such, you're looking to get a job done. And that's something we oftentimes see a bit lacking with startups we see. And of course, one where we try to co-develop that and help guide the startup into that path of, okay, if I use this solution, what is the problem I'm actually fixing? Because at the end of the day, it has to come down to the P&L. How much am I paying, and what is the benefit I'm getting out of it? It could also, of course, be a strategic benefit. It could be qualitative, but still, it has to be very clearly defined in order for basically the entity within the company who's footing the bill in order to be motivated. And it's important to note that it's not just a question of money, but also hours and time that could be spent doing other things. Does that answer the question? I know it's a fairly broad question to begin with.
Yeah, but so you're really open, it sounds like, to AI companies really doing all different things, so across kind of all different departments and use cases as well.
Absolutely, and that really follows kind of the logic of the more we work in concrete examples, which is together with these companies, the better we get. And from my personal perspective, I'd much rather spend 10 times 50,000 euros working on pilots with concrete examples than 500,000 on one study with a strategy consultancy, which is just a PDF document. Basically, at the end of the day, it's a lot easier to learn concretely by doing.
Cool, thanks.
Thanks, Ojo.
Mikael, I also have one question about the new recycling technologies. You said that you focus on physical innovation in that field. How do you involve data, or does data play a role there as well?
Yeah, good question again. I mean, it definitely does. It's one with an industry which is not as mature as many others. I mean, if you look at TSOs and DSOs, or perhaps the wind and solar space, they're fairly forward leaning and are fast at adopting that technology. The use case is a bit more challenging with recycling and waste, but really the question there is the whole logistics chain from the moment you throw something into a bin to the moment it comes out as new materials. So the problem really with waste is it's quite literally a mix of different things. And there's of course the physical technologies, both mechanical recycling, which is a machine sorting things, and chemical recycling, which is a machine processing things and bringing the chemicals out. The better you understand what's going in and where, and the better you can optimize the logistics and understand the material flows from different sides, the better that gets. And one example simply is sensors on bins and how can you really collect the data. Another one is of course the fleet management and kind of deciding what goes where and what the cost is. So it's an area which I see will be developing quite a bit in the next 5 years.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Fantastic. I see you're sharing your screen, Yuri. Do you want me to stop sharing mine?
I think that would be good, right? Because we have one question from the Q&A.
Yeah, sure. Well, maybe I'll kind of answer the question directly. I think I really hear. So basically, an AI-related use case that we incorporated and scaled. It's actually an interesting company because it's one also in the Valo Ventures portfolio called Mist AI. They're an kind of forecasting platform AI tool based out of San Francisco, and it's one of the first really good pilots we did at Fortum as we recently started scaling our efforts there. And we did the pilot in our district heating and cooling network here in Espoo, which is basically the neighboring city from Helsinki. It's part of the capital city area. And as a district heating network operator, one of the big questions you have is how much energy will every node in the system be consuming at any point in time. So we need to forecast demand as granular as possible at different times. And that's, of course, something which, both from the granularity perspective as well as just the power of the statistics tool and the machine it runs through, something which you can really optimize, deliver a lot of value by decreasing the forecasting error. And I can't share, the direct numbers straight away here, but really we had very astounding value benefits and a decrease in the error on average we had for our forecast, and that's really allowing for a substantial use case of several €100,000 being saved each year. And that's one which we piloted last year for about 6 months or so, and now have scaled in the Espoo district heating cooling network, and which we're openly actually looking to work together also in the electricity space in a similar use case.
Great.
Maybe also to take the next one on data sets. Yeah, sure, of course. So basically, actually, we don't have anything kind of prepared sitting in a warehouse that you can now kind of access directly. Of course, we do have a data warehouse, and we can pull out the data based on queries, but that's more of a discussion on what exactly is the use case, and exactly coming back to the point of solving for a challenge directly, getting a job done, as opposed to displaying cool technology. So happy to open up that conversation with any technology, and of course the data we can pull together at the end of the day. If the use case is good, that's never really the bottleneck, as long as the data exists.
Cool. Well, then I think thanks so much for joining, Mikael. Really interesting. Thanks for sharing what you guys do at Fortum. And well, and as I said before, also Mikael is joining one of the sessions later. So if you have further questions and want to get in touch with Mikael directly, you have something to present you or propose, even join one of the sessions with him, and then you can talk directly. With that, thanks so much.
Really looking forward. Thanks, Yuri. Thanks, Charlotte.
Thank you, Mikael.